Marcus Wright, a successful African-American entrepreneur, stepped out of his gleaming sedan and took a deep breath, savoring the crisp morning air of New York. At 38, he had built a tech empire from scratch, and today, at the Royal Crest Hotel, a symbol of the city's opulence, he was attending a meeting with international partners. This deal could elevate his company, Wright Innovations, to new heights, putting it in competition with giants like Google and Microsoft. Marcus's eyes sparkled with determination as he looked up at the grand facade of the Royal Crest, where white marble columns gleamed in the morning sun. But the moment he stepped through the revolving glass doors, Marcus felt a shift in the atmosphere. The hotel lobby, expansive with marble floors and crystal chandeliers, suddenly felt stifling. The glances from guests and staff, all white Americans, swept over him, not with curiosity, but with suspicion. A couple standing near the reception desk whispered to each other, hands covering their mouths. Marcus, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, adjusted his tie and made his way toward the reception desk, his steps confident but cautious. He was no stranger to such looks, but today, something colder in the air told him he was being seen as an outsider in this world of luxury. At the desk, Emily Harper, a young receptionist with her blonde hair tied in a high ponytail, looked up at Marcus. Her professional smile stiffened as her gaze passed over his dark skin. "Good morning, sir," she said, her tone even, but slightly strained. "How may I help you?" Marcus smiled lightly, his voice warm and calm. "Good morning. I have a reservation under the name Marcus Wright. I'm here for a business meeting." Emily hesitated, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. She began typing on her computer, but her fingers moved slowly, as if deliberately stalling. "Let me check, sir," she replied, though her tone was doubtful. Marcus stood still, aware of the eyes watching him from the bartender to the guests waiting for the elevator. The air in the lobby seemed to grow heavier, as if his presence was an unwanted disruption. After several long seconds, Emily looked up, her smile now clearly forced. I don't see a reservation under Marcus Wright, sir." "Are you sure you're at the right hotel?" Marcus kept his face composed, though a flash of anger stirred inside. He knew this script all too well. "I'm certain this is the Royal Crest," he said firmly. "I have the confirmation email if you want to see it." He reached into his suit pocket, preparing to retrieve his phone, but Emily's eyes suddenly sharpened, as if he'd done something threatening. "No need, sir," she cut in, her voice a touch louder, drawing the attention of a nearby security guard. "I'll call the manager to handle this." Marcus took a deep breath, realizing the situation was slipping out of control. He knew one wrong move could make things much worse. But he also knew this: he wouldn't let them push him out of a place he belonged in. Not today. Marcus Wright stood at the reception desk of the Royal Crest Hotel, his gaze sharp yet composed, as Emily Harper, the receptionist, nervously tapped on her keyboard and claimed she couldn't find his reservation. The air in the lobby grew increasingly tense, as Emily, clearly uneasy, turned to whisper into the phone, calling the manager. Curious eyes from guests and other staff fixated on Marcus, as if he were the center of an unwelcome drama. Just seconds later, Charles Bennett, the hotel manager, appeared from a door behind the reception desk. Charles, a tall, middle-aged white American man in a carefully tailored gray suit, radiated authority. But behind his courteous smile was an unmistakable air of arrogance. He glanced at Marcus, his eyes sweeping from head to toe, lingering a moment too long on his dark skin. Charles's smile stiffened, and Marcus could feel the chill of silent judgment in every gesture. "Is there an issue here, Emily?" Charles asked, his voice deep but laced with condescension, as if he was used to resolving every problem through sheer dominance. Emily, visibly relieved by her manager's arrival, answered quickly. "Mr. Bennett, this guest. He says he has a reservation under the name Marcus Wright, but I couldn't find anything in the system." She glanced at Marcus with a hint of smugness, as if she had passed the burden to someone else. Marcus, still calm on the outside, spoke before Charles could respond. "Good morning, sir," he said, his voice steady but assertive. "I have a reservation at this hotel and have received a confirmation email. I can show it to you if needed." He reached into his suit pocket, slowly retrieving his phone, carefully avoiding misunderstanding. But Charles raised his hand to stop him, his smile tinged with contempt. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Wright, is it?" He emphasized Marcus's last name with a hint of sarcasm. "I'm afraid there may have been some mix-up. The Royal Crest maintains stringent standards for its clientele, and we have no record of your reservation." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, but controlled it, keeping his voice composed. "I'm certain there's no mix-up. This is the Royal Crest, and I have an important meeting with international partners this afternoon. I'm asking you to recheck the system, or I can provide the confirmation email to clarify." Charles raised an eyebrow, as if Marcus's words were a personal affront. He crossed his arms and stood taller, his tone sharpening. "I don't think you understand, sir. We don't just go by emails. I must ask you to leave if you're not in our system. We can't allow anyone to disrupt the experience of our other guests." His words hit like an invisible punch, but Marcus didn't flinch. He looked Charles square in the eye, his voice now carrying an unshakable conviction. "I am a legitimate guest of this hotel and have the right to be treated fairly. If you refuse to verify my reservation, I must contact my attorney." The mention of an attorney caused Charles to hesitate for a split second, but he quickly regained his confidence. He turned to Emily and gave a curt order. "Call security. It seems we need to resolve this matter." Then he looked back at Marcus, the cold smile returning. "I suggest you leave quietly, Mr. Wright. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Marcus stood still, feeling his heart rate accelerate. He knew the situation was escalating, and with every passing second, his opportunity to attend the crucial meeting was slipping away. But he also knew that if he backed down now, they would win. Not just Charles, but the entire system of prejudice that had tried to keep him down for years. He clenched his fists, his eyes burning with a resolve that could not be extinguished. This fight was only beginning. The lobby of the Royal Crest Hotel fell into sudden silence as Charles Bennett, the hotel manager, ordered security to be called. Marcus Wright stood firm at the reception desk, his gaze steady, though his heart pounded harder, aware of the dozens of eyes from guests to staff now locked on him. Emily Harper, the receptionist, stepped back slightly, her hands clenched as if to mask her unease. The atmosphere grew suffocating, like the entire room held its breath, anticipating an explosion. Within seconds, 2 security guards appeared from the hallway. Tom Grayson and Greg Walsh, both tall white men. Tom, leading the way, looked at Marcus with a stern glare, one hand resting near the radio strapped to his belt. "What's going on here, Mr. Bennett?" he asked, his voice low but cautious. Charles crossed his arms, that cold smile still stuck on his face. "This guest doesn't have a valid reservation and is refusing to leave," he said, his tone condescending, like explaining something to a child. "Please ensure he exits the hotel immediately." Marcus took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "As I've already stated," he replied, his voice clear and firm in the tense silence, "I have a confirmation email for my reservation. I need a chance to show it." He slowly reached for the pocket of his suit jacket to retrieve his phone, but Tom misunderstood the motion. "Hands up!" Tom shouted, stepping forward, hand brushing the handle of his baton. His voice echoed through the lobby, startling several guests. One even dropped a coffee cup that shattered on the marble floor. Greg, right behind, also stepped forward, eyes sharp. Don't do anything stupid, buddy. Marcus immediately raised both hands, palms facing outward, but he didn't take his eyes off Charles. I was just getting my phone, he said, calm, but tinged with restrained fury. I'm not a threat. You're overreacting. But Charles smirked and signaled the guards forward. Escort him out, he commanded coldly. We don't need any more trouble here. Before Marcus could react, Tom and Greg grabbed an arm, gripping tightly and dragging him toward the revolving glass doors. Their force made Marcus stumble slightly, his tailored suit crumpling under the pressure. Let me go, he said, voice rising. But he resisted the urge to struggle, knowing that any sudden movement could be twisted into a justification for violence. The hotel lobby had now become an unwilling stage. Guests gathered in small groups, whispering among themselves. A few took out their phones to record. Shameful, an older woman muttered, though, whether she meant Marcus or the situation remained unclear. A man in a suit near the elevator, one of the international partners Marcus had come to meet, watched him with a mix of surprise and suspicion, clutching his briefcase as if ready to leave. As Marcus was shoved through the glass doors, one of the guards, Greg, muttered under his breath, "Next time, make sure you check where you belong." The words landed like a blade slicing into Marcus's pride. He paused momentarily and turned his head toward Greg, his eyes blazing, but he said nothing. His silence spoke louder than any retort. On the sidewalk, sunlight blazed down on Marcus as he stood tall, adjusting his suit and trying to collect himself. The roar of New York traffic and the city's relentless pace seemed distant, drowned out by the pounding in his chest. He looked back at the glass doors of the Royal Crest, where silhouettes still watched from inside. Among them, he spotted his business partner, now turning away, shaking his head. Marcus clenched his phone, and the confirmation email remained on the screen. He knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate insult, a pointed reminder that no matter how successful he became, some people would still treat him like he didn't belong. But as he stood there, a fire of determination blazed inside him. They had made a grave mistake, underestimating him. And Marcus swore they would pay for it. Marcus Wright stood on the sidewalk before the Royal Crest Hotel, the New York sunlight glaring down on his crumpled suit. The traffic noise and the city's daily rhythm seemed drowned out by the rage boiling in his chest. He looked back at the revolving glass doors, where curious eyes still peered through, and clenched the phone in his hand. The confirmation email still glowed on the screen, a bitter reminder of the humiliation he had just endured. But just as he turned to leave, his phone began to vibrate. Non-stop texts, emails, and social media notifications flooded in like a tidal wave. No one had expected that a guest in the lobby, a young woman named Sarah Mitchell, had recorded the entire incident. The 3-minute video captured Marcus being maltreated by security guards, Tom and Greg's mocking comment, and Charles Bennett's condescending demeanor. Sarah posted it to Twitter with the caption, "This is how @Royal Crest treats black customers. Shameful, #justice for Marcus." Within minutes, the video went viral at lightning speed. The hashtag #RoyalCrestRacism quickly shot to the top of global trends, attracting millions of views and shares. Users erupted in outrage on platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Reddit. One account wrote, "This isn't a hotel. It's a den of racism." Another commented, "Marcus Wright is the CEO of Wright Innovations, and they treated him like a criminal. Disgusting." Civil rights organizations, including the NAACP, called for a boycott of Royal Crest. Major news outlets, CNN, BBC, and the New York Times, rushed to cover the story with eye-catching headlines. Black entrepreneur humiliated at luxury hotel and Royal Crest, lavish romance, or outdated prejudice. Meanwhile, executives at the headquarters of Royal Crest's parent company were panicking. The company's stock plunged 15% within hours, as investors began pulling out under public pressure. The hotel's website crashed under massive traffic, and its social media pages were flooded with angry comments. Boycott Royal Crest Fire. Charles Bennett. These phrases saturated every post. Loyal customers began canceling reservations, and a major conference previously scheduled at the hotel pulled out, costing the company millions of dollars. Marcus sat before his computer screen in his Manhattan penthouse, watching the firestorm unfold. His assistant Jamal Carter walked in with his phone in hand. "Boss, you need to see this," Jamal said, handing Marcus an article from the Wall Street Journal titled "Royal Crest Crisis: A Racial Misstep That Could Topple an Empire." Jamal continued, "I just got a call from our finance team. Their stock is crashing, and there are internal rumors that the board is holding an emergency meeting." Marcus stared at the screen, eyes sharp. He knew this wasn't just a scandal. It was an opportunity. The humiliation he had suffered had ignited a movement, and the public's firestorm of outrage was now scorching the reputation of Royal Crest. He turned to Jamal, his voice low and resolute. "Call the finance team and the lawyers. We move now." As he stood, Marcus glanced out the window, eyes fixed on the distant outline of the Royal Crest. Once a symbol of luxury, the hotel was now descending into chaos. He knew this wasn't just about him anymore. This was a chance to change everything, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been mistreated like him. The fire of outrage had been lit, and Marcus would make sure it burned bright. Marcus Wright sat in his luxurious penthouse apartment in Manhattan, the city lights glittering through the large glass windows. In front of him was his laptop screen, displaying the stock chart of the corporation that owned the Royal Crest Hotel, with a blood-red curve plummeting uncontrollably. His phone buzzed constantly, messages from his team and friends pouring in, all centered around the scandal shaking Royal Crest. The video of his public humiliation surpassed 10 million views, and the hashtag Royal Crest Racism still dominated social media. But Marcus wasn't driven by emotion. In his mind, a bold plan was taking shape. Jamal Carter, Marcus's loyal assistant, walked into the room holding a cup of coffee and an iPad. "Boss, the finance team just sent a report," Jamal said excitedly, brimming. "Royal Crest is in chaos. Major investors are pulling out, and the board has no idea how to respond. This is a golden opportunity for us to get in." Marcus nodded, his sharp eyes scanning the numbers on the screen. "They shot themselves in the foot," he said, voice low but firm. "But we have to move fast, call the lawyers, and get in touch with Clara Nguyen. If she's still interested in investing, this is the time." Clara Nguyen. A mysterious and powerful investor had once reached out to Marcus after a tech conference 2 years ago. Clara was a Vietnamese American who had built a financial empire from scratch and was always looking for visionary partners. After watching the video of the Royal Crest incident, Clara emailed Marcus expressing her outrage and offering support. "I believe in you, Marcus," she wrote. "Let's turn this injustice into an opportunity for change." But not everything was going smoothly. Just as Marcus prepared for a virtual meeting with his finance team, a call came through from James Whitaker, one of his key business partners. James, who had been present in the Royal Crest lobby when Marcus was thrown out, spoke with hesitation. "Marcus, I'm sorry about what happened, but some partners are getting nervous. This incident is drawing too much attention. They're worried it might jeopardize our deal." Marcus clenched his fist, feeling the pressure mounting. "James, you saw what happened," he replied, his voice steady but with an edge of steel. "I didn't cause this. I'm the victim of racial discrimination. If our partners don't dare to stand on the side of justice, then maybe they're not the kind of people we should be doing business with." James hesitated. "I understand, Marcus, but I need your assurance that this won't overshadow the deal." We only have 2 days left to convince the European side. The call ended, leaving Marcus in heavy silence. He knew the incident at Royal Crest hadn't just hurt his pride. It now threatened the significant opportunities he had worked so hard to build. But instead of backing down, Marcus felt the fire of determination flare even stronger. He turned to Jamal, eyes burning with resolve. "We're not just buying Royal Crest," he said. "We're going to turn it into a symbol of change. Call Clara. Tonight we end their charade." Jamal nodded, a broad smile spreading across his face. As he left to arrange the meeting, Marcus stood up and looked out across the New York skyline. The Royal Crest Hotel, the place that had tried to humiliate him, was now teetering on the edge of collapse. And Marcus Wright, the man they had thrown out through their doors, was about to step back in, not as a victim, but as the one who would decide their fate. This unexpected opportunity wasn't just a financial deal. It was the first step in a quest for justice. Night had fallen over Manhattan, and the city lights sparkled like scattered stars. In the conference room of Wright Innovations headquarters, Marcus Wright stood before a large screen where his finance and legal teams were working non-stop. Charts, contracts, and emails filled the space, creating a tension-charged atmosphere like an invisible battlefield. On the table, a cup of coffee had long gone cold, but Marcus's eyes still burned with determination. He knew tonight would decide not only the future of Royal Crest, but also the legacy he intended to leave behind. Marcus's assistant, Jamal Carter, entered the room holding a phone. "Boss Clara Nguyen has joined the video call," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "But there's a problem. Richard Hayes, the second-largest shareholder of Royal Crest, is trying to block the deal. He just submitted a competing offer to the board." Marcus clenched his fist, feeling the pressure weigh heavier. Richard Hayes, a wealthy and influential white American businessman, was a major player in the real estate industry. He had deep pockets and long-standing ties with members of Royal Crest's board of directors. Marcus had once met Hayes at a charity gala, where Hayes had made a sneering remark about new tech money, a thinly veiled jab at Marcus. Now Hayes had no intention of letting someone like Marcus take control of Royal Crest. Clara Nguyen appeared on the large screen, her face sharp and commanding. "Marcus, I've reviewed the numbers," Clara said, her voice low but firm. "We have enough capital to purchase 51% of the shares, but Hayes is playing dirty. He's spreading rumors that you're only seeking revenge, and some board members are wavering. We need to act fast." Marcus nodded, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Thank you, Clara. I knew Hayes wouldn't make this easy, but he underestimated us." He turned to his legal team and issued a concise order. "Prepare the final contract. We're making an offer they can't refuse before midnight." The negotiations unfolded like a rapid-fire chess match. Marcus's finance team worked relentlessly, analyzing every figure, while the lawyers drafted airtight terms to protect the deal from Hayes's interference. From her office in San Francisco, Clara directly contacted a key Royal Crest board member, persuading them that Marcus was not just an investor, but a visionary who could save the hotel from collapse. But Hayes wasn't going down without a fight. In an email to the board, he announced an increased bid and pledged to maintain the current management team, implying Charles Bennett and the old system. Royal Crest needs stability, not an emotional revolution. Hayes wrote his words dripping with bias, as he painted Marcus as an opportunist exploiting scandal for gain. At 11:00 p.m., Marcus received a direct call from board chairwoman Elizabeth Thornton. "Mr. Wright," she said, her tone cautious. "Your offer is very compelling, but Mr. Hayes carries a lot of influence. Some members are concerned that handing over Royal Crest to someone like you could cause further instability." Marcus took a deep breath, controlling his anger. "Ms. Thornton," he replied, his voice calm but razor-sharp. Royal Crest is collapsing because of the instability created by their prejudice. I'm not buying this hotel to own it. I'm buying it to rebuild it, to make it a place where no one is humiliated like I was. If the board chooses Hayes, they choose the past. I'm offering the future. Thornton was silent for a few seconds. Finally, she nodded through the screen. I'll bring your proposal to the board now. At exactly 11:58 p.m., a confirmation email from the board of directors arrived. With Clara's financial backing and the sharp strategy of his team, Marcus had outmaneuvered Hayes, finalizing the purchase of 51% of Royal Crest's shares. He became the hotel's new owner. A victory not just in finance, but a powerful blow to the system that had tried to humiliate him. Marcus rose, gazing out the window, toward the glittering lights of the Royal Crest in the distance. "We did it, Jamal," he said, his voice low, but filled with emotion. "Now it's time they learned the cost of arrogance." The next morning, the first rays of sunlight shone through the pristine white columns of the Royal Crest Hotel. But inside the lobby, the atmosphere was heavy, like the calm before a storm. Marcus Wright, dressed in a sharp black suit, walked through the revolving glass doors, the same doors he had been roughly escorted out just one day prior. Today, he was no longer a humiliated guest. He was the new owner of the Royal Crest, and every step he took on the marble floor echoed like an unshakable declaration. The hotel lobby was at peak morning hour, with staff bustling to assist check-ins and guests pulling suitcases back and forth. But when Marcus appeared, the room suddenly froze. Emily Harper, the front desk clerk who had previously denied his reservation, was sorting through papers when she looked up. Her eyes widened, and her face went pale, as if she had seen a ghost. Mr. Wright," she stammered, trembling, dropping a stack of documents to the floor. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He stopped before the front desk, his gaze sweeping across the lobby, registering every shocked look from staff and guests. Some whispered to each other, recognizing him from the viral video. Marcus turned to Emily, offering a faint but cold smile. "Good. You're still here," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "Call your manager. Right now." Emily nodded frantically, quickly dialing on the phone, her voice so shaky it was nearly unintelligible. Just seconds later, Charles Bennett, the former hotel manager, emerged from the back office. His gray suit was still immaculate, but his face told a different story. The smug confidence from the day before had vanished, replaced by tension and confusion. When he saw Marcus, Charles froze as if nailed to the floor. "Mr. Wright," he said, forcing a strained smile. "What brings you back here?" Marcus stepped closer, his eyes locked on Charles. "I'm not back as a guest, Mr. Bennett," he said calmly, his voice sharp as a blade. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the front desk with a firm thud. "These are the documents confirming I'm the new owner of the Royal Crest. As of today, I'm the one running this place." A wave of murmurs spread across the lobby. Emily covered her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Nearby, a bartender dropped a tray of glasses, the sound of shattering crystal echoing in stunned silence. Charles snatched the folder, his hands trembling as he flipped through the pages. This can't be," he muttered, voice cracking. "How did you—" "How?" Marcus cut in, his voice now cold and merciless. "When you and your team chose to humiliate me, you pushed the Royal Crest into a crisis. I simply seized the opportunity you created." He turned toward the staff gathering nearby, his gaze sweeping across each face. "All staff report to the main conference room in 10 minutes. We have things to discuss." Without waiting for a response, Marcus walked past Charles toward the elevators. Charles stood motionless, his face flushed red, clutching the documents as if he wanted to rip them apart. Emily and the other employees exchanged panicked glances, unsure what to do. In the conference room, Marcus stood before dozens of staff, from front desk clerks to security chefs to housekeeping. The atmosphere was thick, a mix of fear and curiosity. "I am Marcus Wright," he began, his voice resonating. "And as of today, I am the owner of the Royal Crest. What happened yesterday, the discrimination, the humiliation, will never be allowed to happen again. Effective immediately. Mr. Charles Bennett is demoted to front desk staff. The managerial position will be filled by someone who shares a vision of justice and equality." A gasp rippled through the room. Standing in the corner, Charles hung his head, his face ghostly pale. Some staff whispered to each other. A few looked at Marcus with awe and uncertainty. "I will announce further changes in the coming days," Marcus continued. "But make no mistake, the Royal Crest will no longer tolerate prejudice. If anyone disagrees, the door is always open." Marcus watched the staff disperse as the meeting ended, sensing a shift in the air. Some, like Emily, were frightened. Others looked at him with hope, like a housekeeper standing quietly in the back. Charles, now just a front desk clerk, left silently, shoulders slumped like a man who had lost everything. Marcus knew this was only the beginning. This reversal of power would stir up storms, and he was ready to face the opposition. The Royal Crest was now his battlefield, and he would let no one stand in his way. The afternoon at the Royal Crest Hotel passed in a tense silence, as if the entire building was holding its breath following Marcus Wright's shocking announcement. The main lobby still shimmered with crystal chandeliers and marble floors, but behind the luxurious facade, whispers of discontent began to spread. Marcus, now the new owner, sat in a temporary office on the top floor, reviewing financial reports and planning reforms. But he knew full well that change never came easily, and resistance lurked in the shadows. In the staff break room, Charles Bennett, now a front desk clerk, stood against the wall, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. The gray suit that once symbolized his authority now looked misplaced, like a relic from the past. Around him was a group of former loyal staff who had served under the system Charles had ruled. Among them was Brian Carter, the former kitchen supervisor, known for his fiery temper, and Emily Harper, the front desk clerk, still reeling from Marcus's return. "We can't let him take over everything," Charles said, his voice low but sharp, his gaze scanning the group. "Wright doesn't understand how this hotel operates. He just wants revenge to destroy everything we built." Brian nodded, clenching his fists. "He fired you, demoted all of us. And now he wants to change everything. I heard he plans to hire a bunch of people. People like him." Brian's words were filled with prejudice, causing a few others in the group to nod in agreement. Though Emily remained silent, her expression was conflicted. Charles sneered, a bitter smile curling on his lips. "Exactly. We need to act before Wright turns this place into a joke. I propose a plan. Spread rumors that he's incompetent and shake the confidence of both staff and guests. If we create enough pressure, the board might intervene, or at least we can organize a strike." The group murmured in agreement, but none noticed a shadow standing just outside the door, listening intently. Lisa Monroe, a housekeeper who had worked at the Royal Crest for over 10 years, had overheard the entire conversation. Lisa, a white woman in her mid-40s, had long been dismissed by Charles for her lowly job. She never forgot when Charles refused her a raise, telling her, "People like you don't deserve more." Hearing Charles's plan stirred a wave of anger in her and a glimmer of hope. Marcus Wright, who had promised change, might be the first real chance for her and others like her to be respected. Lisa quietly walked away, her heart pounding. She knew exposing Charles could make her an outcast, But she also knew she couldn't just stand by. By the end of the day, she knocked on Marcus's office door, her hands trembling as she stood before him. "Mr. Wright," she said, her voice small but resolute. "I need to tell you something. Charles and a few others. They're planning to go against you." Marcus looked up from his desk, his gaze sharp but unsurprised. He had anticipated resistance, but its speed and scale gave him pause. "Thank you, Lisa," he said warmly. "Tell me everything." Lisa recounted the entire conversation, from the plan to spread rumors to organizing a strike. Marcus listened, jotting down every detail, his eyes never leaving Lisa. When she finished, he stood and touched her shoulder, a sincere gesture. "You're very brave, Lisa. I promise you won't suffer any consequences for this. Would you like to join me in building a better royal crest?" Lisa blinked, surprised by his sincerity. "Yes, sir," she replied, feeling for the first time in 10 years that she mattered. As Lisa left, Marcus sat back down, eyes turning to the window, where the lights of Royal Crest glittered in the night. Charles and his cohort thought they could defeat him with schemes in the shadows, but they had underestimated him. Marcus opened his laptop and began drafting a strategy to extinguish the resistance and turn it into an opportunity to solidify his authority. The battle for Royal Crest was heating up, and Marcus was ready for whatever came next. The morning at the Royal Crest Hotel began with an unusual energy. The grand lobby, usually bustling with the chatter and laughter of guests, now carried a heavy silence of anticipation. The new owner, Marcus Wright, ordered the hotel's first mandatory training session on cultural sensitivity and equality for all employees, receptionists, chefs, security guards, and housekeepers alike. Posters were pinned throughout the employee areas with bold lettering: Royal Crest, a new beginning. Respect, equality, inclusion. But behind the professional appearance, tension still simmered like a flame, waiting for a spark. In the large conference room, more than 100 staff members sat packed together, the atmosphere weighed down by curiosity, skepticism, and resentment. Marcus stood at the podium, his sharp gaze sweeping over the crowd. Thanks to a tip from Lisa Monroe, he knew Charles Bennett and his faction were plotting against him. But today, he didn't just want to extinguish rebellion. He wanted to change their hearts and minds. "I'm not standing here to punish anyone," Marcus began echoing through the silent room. "I'm here to build a royal crest, where everyone, regardless of race or background, is treated with respect. But to do that, we must face the truth. What happened to me isn't an exception. It's the product of a system that has tolerated prejudice for far too long." He introduced Aisha Thompson, a young black woman newly appointed as head of guest relations. Aisha stepped up, her posture confident, but her eyes carrying traces of pain. "I used to work as a receptionist at another hotel." She began, her voice clear, but full of emotion. "I was denied promotion 3 times, even though I had the qualifications and the experience. Someone less capable got the job each time because they weren't black. I know what it feels like to be dismissed, and I'm here to ensure no one has to experience that at Royal Crest." Aisha's words landed like a stone cast into still water. Some employees, like Lisa Monroe, nodded in agreement. But in the back row, Charles Bennett sat with arms crossed, his gaze cold, while Brian Carter whispered something to a snickered colleague. Marcus recognized the resistance, but pressed on. He announced a sweeping reform plan. All employees would participate in weekly training sessions, and leadership roles would prioritize candidates from marginalized communities. "We're not just changing policy," Marcus said. "We're changing the culture." After the training session, an unexpected moment occurred. As people left the room, Charles, now a front desk clerk, approached Aisha. "You talked about being denied promotion," he said, his voice hesitant, fists clenched. I used to make those decisions. Not here, but somewhere else." I didn't think it was wrong until now. Charles's confession stunned Aisha, but she quickly regained composure. Then you have a chance to make it right, Mr. Bennett, she replied, calm but resolute. But you have to want to change. Marcus, standing not far away, overheard the conversation. He didn't step in, but his eyes showed a glint of hope. Charles, the man who once humiliated him, was beginning to waver, not from fear, but from the truth Aisha had delivered. But Marcus knew not everyone would be willing to change. During the lunch break, Marcus received a report from Jamal Carter that Brian Carter and a small group of staff were secretly meeting in the kitchen, continuing their plan to spread rumors about Marcus's incompetence. They're trying to discredit you in front of the guests, Jamal said. There are rumors they're talking to the press. Marcus nodded, his eyes cold. Let them try, he said. They have no idea who they're dealing with. He called Clara and Gwyn, requesting her help in contacting major media outlets to control the narrative. At the same time, he instructed his team to prepare a public press conference where he would announce a new vision for Royal Crest. If they want a media war, Marcus told Jamal with a confident smile, we'll go bigger. Marcus stood in his office looking down at the Royal Crest lobby through the glass window. His reform was shaking the very foundation of the hotel, but he knew the road ahead remained treacherous. Charles might change, but Brian and others like him wouldn't yield so easily. The battle to turn Royal Crest into a symbol of justice had just begun, and Marcus was ready to fight. The Royal Crest Hotel, once resplendent with chandelier light and the cheerful chatter of guests, was now plunged into unprecedented chaos. 2 days after the first cultural sensitivity training session, Brian Carter, the former kitchen supervisor, and a group of disgruntled employees launched a strike. They gathered in front of the main lobby, holding high banners that read, "Justice for Staff" and "No New Ownership." Their chants echoed down the corridors, causing panic among guests and leaving the remaining staff in a dilemma. Media outlets from Fox News to the New York Times quickly descended, turning Royal Crest into the center of public attention. Marcus Wright stood by the window in the top-floor office, looking down at the crowd assembling below. His phone vibrated nonstop with messages from Jamal Carter, his assistant, and Clara Nguyen, his investor ally. "Boss, things are getting worse," Jamal reported over the phone. "Brian has contacted a tabloid accusing you of authoritarian management. Several VIP guests just canceled their bookings, and the board of directors is calling for an emergency meeting." Marcus clenched his fists, feeling the weight of pressure settle in. The strike not only threatened the reputation of Royal Crest, but also jeopardized the international deal into which he had poured his heart. But he knew that retreating now would mean defeat, not just for him, but for everyone who believed in his vision. "Arrange a meeting immediately," Marcus ordered. "Invite all employees, including the strikers. I'll speak to them directly." Just an hour later, the main conference room at Royal Crest was packed. The striking employees, led by Brian, stood at the front, their eyes defiant. Charles Bennett, now a front desk clerk, stood in the corner of the room, his gaze wavering between curiosity and unease after his recent conversation with Aisha Thompson. Lisa Monroe, the housekeeper who had exposed Charles's conspiracy, sat near the podium, her eyes steady with support for Marcus. The tension in the room was as taut as a wire, as if a single spark could ignite an explosion. Marcus stepped up to the podium, bringing no papers or notes. He stood tall, his eyes sweeping across the crowd from the angry faces of the strikers to the curious glances of neutral staff. "I know you're angry," he began, his voice deep but resonant. "You think I came here to destroy Royal Crest, to take away your jobs and your stability. But let me tell you a story." He paused, taking a deep breath, his gaze growing distant. 20 years ago, I was a black boy in Brooklyn projects. My mother worked 3 shifts a day to raise me, but she always taught me that a person's worth isn't defined by the color of their skin, but by what they do. I worked tirelessly building Wright innovations from nothing. And yet, even standing in this very lobby, wearing an expensive suit and holding million-dollar contracts, I was still treated like I didn't belong, just because of my skin color. Marcus's voice grew stronger, though it carried a sincerity that hushed the entire room. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to ensure no one ever has to endure the humiliation I went through. Royal Crest is not just a hotel, it's a community. And I want you to be part of that community, but only if you respect everyone, no matter who they are. His words swept through the room like a gust of wind, shaking the resolve of some in the striking group. Once aligned with Brian, a young employee lowered their head, their eyes wavering. Lisa stood up and applauded, and a few others joined in, creating an unexpected wave of support. But Brian remained unmoved. He stepped forward, pointing at Marcus, his voice roaring. Don't try to fool us with your emotional stories. You're destroying this place, and we won't let you. Marcus looked Brian straight in the eyes, unwavering. Mr. Carter, he said, calm but sharp. You're mistaken if you think prejudice and resistance will save Royal Crest. I'm giving you and anyone here a choice: stay and learn to change or leave. The decision is yours. The room erupted with whispers and debate. Some striking employees, moved by Marcus's words, quietly left the group and returned to their seats. But Brian, his face flushed with rage, shouted, "This isn't over, Wright," before leading a small group out of the room, leaving behind a divided crowd. Marcus remained at the podium as the meeting concluded, feeling his heartbeat finally slow. He knew the strike wasn't entirely over, but his speech had stirred the hearts of many. Lisa approached him with a smile. "You did it, Mr. Wright," she said. "They're starting to listen." Marcus nodded, his gaze drifting toward the window, where the lights of Royal Crest still blazed in the night. The battle wasn't over yet, but he had won an important victory, not through power, but sincerity. Now he had to prepare for the next step, turning Royal Crest into a symbol of justice, despite any obstacle. After the shocking strike, the Royal Crest Hotel entered a new phase, like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. Once filled with protest chants, the grand lobby now radiated new energy, not the arrogance of the past, but the warmth of a community learning to come together. The new owner, Marcus Wright, did not rest after his moral victory during the employee meeting. He accelerated reforms, continued cultural sensitivity training, and appointed new staff like Aisha Thompson to leadership roles. But what truly gave him hope was the quiet transformation unfolding within those who had once opposed him. One morning, Marcus witnessed an unexpected scene as he passed through the lobby. Charles Bennett, now a front desk clerk, was welcoming a black family, a couple with 2 young children. Charles, who had once ordered Marcus removed from the hotel, now bent down, smiling at the little girl, handing her a piece of candy from the counter. "Welcome to the Royal Crest," he said gently, his hand trembling slightly as he handed over the room key. But as the family walked away, Charles stood still, his eyes distant, as if confronting an old version of himself. That moment was no coincidence. Charles began reflecting on his actions after his conversation with Aisha Thompson and Marcus's speech. He recalled the times he had refused service to guests based solely on their skin color, and the times he had mocked staff like Lisa Monroe for their menial jobs. For the first time, he felt true shame, not for his demotion, but for the harm he had caused others. He stood there, still gripping the key, and felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Later that day, Charles knocked on Marcus's office door. Standing in his wrinkled clerk's uniform, his eyes downcast, he began, "Mr. Wright," his voice hesitant, I want to apologize for what I did to you and others. I didn't realize how wrong I was until I heard Miss Thompson and saw that family today. I want to change if you'll give me a chance." Marcus looked at Charles with a sharp but non-judgmental gaze. He rose from his chair, stepped closer, and touched Charles's shoulder. "Change isn't easy, Mr. Bennett," he said warmly. "But recognizing your mistakes is the first step. If you're truly willing, you have a place here. Prove it through your actions." Charles nodded, eyes misty, and left with a humility he had never shown. That moment marked a turning point, not just for Charles, but for Royal Crest. Other employees witnessing Charles's transformation began to open up. Lisa Monroe, now promoted to housekeeping supervisor, organized break-time sharing circles, where staff recounted their experiences with bias. These stories of pain from being dismissed and pride in finally being seen began knitting the team together. Meanwhile, Marcus and his team worked tirelessly to restore Royal Crest's reputation. A public press conference backed by Clara Nguyen drew dozens of reporters from outlets like CNN and The Guardian. Marcus stood at the microphone and declared, "Royal Crest is no longer a symbol of exclusive luxury. It will be a place where everyone is welcomed and respected." He announced a scholarship fund for employees from disadvantaged communities and a partnership with civil rights organizations like the NAACP to ensure transparency. The public response was overwhelming. Positive reviews flooded Yelp and TripAdvisor, praising the transformation in service and atmosphere at Royal Crest. One guest wrote, "I've never felt so genuinely welcomed at a hotel. The staff truly care about who you are." Civil rights organizations offered public endorsements, and a major conference returned its reservation, bringing in crucial revenue to stabilize finances. Still, Marcus knew everything wasn't perfect. Brian Carter and a few defiant employees had left after the strike, and some negative rumors still lingered online. But as he stood in the lobby, watching Aisha guide a new group of guests, Lisa inspecting work with a bright smile, and Charles gently assisting an elderly guest, Marcus felt a genuine transformation taking root. Royal Crest was no longer just a hotel. It was becoming a symbol of inclusion, a place where the wounds of the past were beginning to heal. Marcus stood alone in his office as dusk fell, gazing out over the New York skyline. He knew the journey wasn't over, but what he had accomplished, from Charles's redemption to community support, proved that justice was about retribution and building a better world. And he was ready to keep fighting for it. 3 months after the strike, the Royal Crest Hotel had transformed into a new symbol in New York, a place of luxury and a beacon of justice and inclusion. The grand lobby, with its pristine white columns and sparkling chandeliers, was filled with laughter and warmth from guests of all backgrounds and walks of life. The hotel's promotional posters no longer flaunted luxury alone, but proudly proclaimed Royal Crest, where everyone belongs. Marcus Wright, who had once been thrown out of this glass door, had turned it into a legacy beyond anything he had ever dreamed of. Marcus stood by the window in the top-floor office, looking down at the bustling lobby below. Aisha Thompson, now Director of Guest Relations, guided a group of international visitors with a radiant smile. Lisa Monroe, promoted to head of housekeeping, walked past with a team of room attendants, chatting cheerfully like old friends. Charles Bennett, once the arrogant manager and now a devoted front desk clerk, was helping an elderly guest with luggage, his eyes reflecting humility and sincerity. Each of them, in their way, had become part of the vision Marcus had built. The journey was far from easy. After the strike, Marcus faced wave after wave of challenges. Malicious rumors spread by Brian Carter's group, pressure from investors concerned about profitability, and skepticism from longtime guests accustomed to the old ways. But with support from Clara Nguyen, who provided financial backing and connected him with civil rights organizations, Marcus turned obstacles into opportunities. He expanded the cultural sensitivity training program, established a diverse employee council to oversee policies, and launched a community initiative funding scholarships for youth from underserved neighborhoods. The results exceeded all expectations. Royal Crest became a global destination of choice, with booking rates soaring, thanks to glowing reviews on social media and in the press. A New York Times article praised, "Under Marcus Wright's leadership, Royal Crest has redefined the hospitality industry, proving that justice and profit can go hand in hand." Organizations like the NAACP awarded the hotel for its inclusivity, and a major international conference chose Royal Crest as its venue, generating record-breaking revenue. Employees like Aisha and Lisa were not just leaders. They were symbols of change, inspiring others to rise. One afternoon, as Marcus walked through the lobby, he caught Charles chatting with a new employee, sharing lessons from his past. "I used to think I knew everything," Charles said quietly, "but Mr. Wright gave me the chance to learn again." The new hire, a young black man, nodded, eyes hopeful. Marcus smiled, realizing that his legacy wasn't in numbers or headlines. It was in the lives transformed because of him. As the sun set, Marcus stood alone in his office, looking at New York's glowing skyline. He thought of his mother, who had sacrificed everything so he could rise. He thought of the boy from Brooklyn, who had dreamed of a fairer world. And he thought of Royal Crest, once a place of humiliation, now proof that change was possible, even in the hardest places. Marcus sat down, opened his laptop, and wrote a letter to all employees. "Together we've built a new Royal Crest," he wrote. "But our work isn't done. Let's continue to fight for justice, not just here, but wherever you go." He sent the letter, closed the laptop, and stood feeling a profound peace. Royal Crest was no longer just a hotel. It was a reminder that a new legacy could be born from the ashes of injustice, a legacy of dignity, equality, and hope. As Marcus walked out of his office, he knew that no matter how long the road ahead, he had already left a mark that could never be erased. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs inspiration. Leave your thoughts, and together we can keep building a world where everyone is valued.